To say that the Canadian economy is tied to the U.S. economy is, of course, an understatement. Billions in trade, supply chain interconnectivity, commerce via tourism, hospitality, services, and so on make them an indispensable partner. But as the uncertainty and economic fallout from this pandemic stretches on, does that also mean that our reliance opens us up to a dangerous level of risk? With us on that, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Inu Manik, research fellow at the Cato Institute. On Cape Cod in Massachusetts, Sarah Kaplan, director at the Institute for Gender and the Economy at the U of T's Rotman School of Management. And in our nation's capital, Peter Hall, vice president and chief economist at Export Development Canada. And it's great to welcome you three to TVO tonight. I do have to start by asking a couple of odd questions to get us started. Sarah, why are you in Cape Cod?
Well, I have the extraordinary privilege of having a cottage here on Cape Cod in the U.S. as I was a U.S. citizen, although now also a Canadian citizen. And we had decided on March 9th to come down just for a few days just to recover from a hard couple of months of work. And then the border closed, and we don't actually know when we're going to be coming back to Canada at this point.
So you are stuck there. You can't cross the border.
We probably could, but it would be difficult, and it's unclear that being in a condo in Toronto is better than being in a cottage on Cape Cod. And so we've just decided that the risk of travel is not worth it at this point.
Good call. And Inu, how about you? Why are you in Vancouver?
Well, I came here in early April to help out with my parents and take care of them during this crisis. And it was right after the border closures had gone into effect. I managed to get a flight, and it was surprising because there were quite a few flights leaving Washington, D.C. Into Toronto and to Vancouver. So I made it through, but there's been a dearth of flights to go back. So there's almost no easy way to return home at this point, even though there are the possibilities to potentially do so. But it's really, really tricky. And getting here was surprisingly easy, I have to say, with very little questions asked at the airport of entry when I did arrive.
Well, I'm glad you're all safe and sound wherever you are, and I hope that you get home safe and sound eventually. Let's start our discussion now with this excerpt from the Globe and Mail. Here's John Ibbotson, who's a fine columnist for them. He writes, any hope of economic recovery in Canada from the novel coronavirus pandemic hinges on the American economy recovering first. This is the worst possible news, for the United States is self-immolating. The pandemic has savaged both the American and Canadian economies. Borders are closed, tourism and hospitality industries have cratered, airlines are on government life support, supply chains are disrupted, retail is operating at a fraction of normal, food security is at risk. Both economies are contracting and unemployment is increasing at a frightening pace. This is the inevitable economic emergency brought on by COVID-19, which forced both countries to shut down their economies, but the U.S. is doing everything in its power to make things worse. And he wrote this, of course, before the events of the last several days, where so many American cities are under protest, looting, demonstrating, and so on and so forth. Let's just start with John's column, and Sarah, start us off. Do we agree with the way he's characterized the situation?
Well, I definitely think that things are pretty terrible in the United States right now. The combination of COVID and the issues of racial injustice coming together are really devastating. And so it is true, it's going to make all of this combined is going to make it much harder to recover. And as Canada and the US being each other's, most important trading partners, this is going to make things quite difficult going forward. So I definitely agree with the sentiment. I think it creates some opportunities for Canada to differentiate itself on the global stage, and hopefully we'll do that.
And we'll talk about that in a bit. Inu, how about you? Does John have it right?
I think generally I agree that the sentiment is correct, that there are challenges being presented by the United States in particular. But I also think it's worth keeping in mind that what we're experiencing now is a really unique historical event. This is not a normal recession. In fact, we hit the brakes on all of our own economies, and we just don't know. We can't foresee how things are going to play out once we do turn things back online. So part of it has to be that we have to be really pragmatic and find solutions going forward and cooperate as much as possible. And it's difficult right now with the United States.
Peter, your take on it.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with what either Sarah or Inu have said. The thing that I, as an economist, want to point out really is what is unique to the United States environment, how it is that they're actually dealing with things. And as Inu has said, there are so many similarities from one economy to the next in terms of the magnitude of shutdown, the depth to which things have fallen. The United States actually hasn't, according to its own statistics, fallen by as much as many other OECD economies have. And so to pre-conclude that they're doing everything wrong at this point in time is sort of disingenuous. Their GDP numbers are actually quite impressive. They're not sinking as much. And of course, let's remember that the United States economy, in terms of how it allocates labor and capital, is a very efficient place. And so it is one of the economies that is best placed to actually come out of this just because of its fundamentals. Remember one other thing inside of all of this as well, and that is pre-COVID, the world was embroiled in populism everywhere. So there is a form of it that's being manifest in the United States at the moment, and it's a very devastating form. I don't want to belittle that, but that is something that the world actually took into this downturn, and it's not too far away from reality in many other economies.
Well, you know, it manifests itself in a bunch of different ways in the Trump administration. They are, yes, very suspicious of international institutions. They want to get out of the WHO. They've got constant attacks on the WTO, the trade organization. There seems to be a perpetual trade war with China. Okay, that's their story, but I want to better understand the potential impact on us in Canada. How do you see it?
I think the impact is going to be pretty stark. It's undoubtedly a troubling sign that the U.S. appears to be abdicating from its leadership position in international institutions. Withdrawal from the WHO, for example, in the middle of a pandemic, will allow for Chinese influence to grow there and also to weaken the investigation into COVID-19. So if you think there's something wrong with the organization, usually you shouldn't leave it. You should try to reform it within it. And that's not what the United States is doing. And with the WTO, we're seeing similar threats to withdrawal, even though I wouldn't take those as seriously, but that's really going to impact Canada as well, because we are such close trading partners. We've always worked together in these institutions, but the U.S. is not really cooperating on the reform agenda at the WTO either, and is sort of going on its own in that vein as well. So I think that's going to be a really big challenge for Canada, trying to seek a compromise at the WTO.
And let me do a quick follow-up with you, on that. I know that well, the Cato Institute, I think, is a libertarian organization that usually advocates for more trade and less government intervention. And Donald Trump is, he's not exactly following that playbook right now. And I'd like to know what he's doing to your blood pressure.
It's been persistently high for the last 4 years, I have to say. Protectionism under Trump has just been a very difficult thing for us to wrap our hands around. From the trade wars with China, the Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum that were used as a bargaining chip even in the NAFTA negotiations. I mean, to think of that, to use that as a bargaining chip against our closest trading partner, it was really shocking to see that happen. So the U.S. Commitment to its America First agenda is really going to put America last, and Canada is definitely going to suffer from this. So it's been certainly raising my blood pressure over the years.
Sarah, as I understand some of the work that you've been doing, you study multinational corporations such as Nike and Walmart, and the free flow of goods and services is obviously hugely important to companies like those. How are they reacting to some of the protectionism that they are seeing from the U.S. these days?
Well, I think the protectionism is extremely tricky because all these global corporations have supply chains that flow back and forth across the border. And with the border with Canada, goods, if you looked at auto manufacturing, go back and forth before a car is actually built. When you look at a company like Walmart, which you mentioned, they account for in the United States about 10% of all imports from China for consumption. And so if we're going to go into a trade war with China, what Walmart itself has said is that it's going to have two impacts, neither of which are necessarily very good for the US economy, and certainly not good for our trading partners either. One is they're going to be shifting to other countries, not shifting back to the US for manufacturing, but shifting to other lower cost manufacturers. And two, because the tariffs, they're going to be putting additional pressure on those suppliers to create a lower priced goods, which is not going to be good for the workers in those factories or for environmental conditions in those locations, because they won't have the resources to do a good job with the manufacturing and take care of their social responsibilities. So this is going to have a net negative impact, and it's not going to lead to more jobs at home for sure.
Is there any way for us, Sarah, not to be collateral damage in that fight?
That is a very good question. I think from a trade standpoint, we have to recognize how close the partnership is. And so, from a certain standpoint, I think there will be some collateral damage. I think what it does do is give us the opportunity to turn to like minded partners. And really, we have been talking for many, many years in Canada about diversifying trade. So I understand that that's a tricky thing to do, but to double down on the broader set of partners that we have, and also to take a stand that's very much for important global institutions like the WHO and the WTO, which allow us to have good functioning economies and healthy people. So I think Canada has the opportunity to do that right now.
Well, Peter, I remember the current Prime Minister's father trying to make that case that we had to de emphasize our trade with the United States and diversify our trading relationships around the world. But given the current pandemic, how concerned are you with our ability to be able to do that?
Well, there are lots of pronouncements, Steve, about the end of globalization, reshoring, nearshoring, what companies are actually going to do with their supply chains coming out of this. When we look at previous pandemic situations where the same pronouncements were actually made, once we actually came out the other end of that, there wasn't nearly as much reallocation and redistribution as was projected or threatened, I guess, during the pandemic itself. And so we got to ask ourselves, why is that the case? Very well-intentioned corporations that were very well heeled, they had the ability to do this. Why did they not actually go forward with those plans? Well, if they all want to do it at the same time, what we're talking about is business investment here. And it's well known that if you want to do a complete retooling, machinery and equipment wise, on your plant floor, it's going to take you at least 6 months to do that. And if everybody's doing it at the same time, it's probably going to take a little bit longer because there's a bit of a choke point there. If you need to create a plant to go along with that equipment, boy, you could be waiting 2 or 3 years in order to get all your land servicing, your permitting and everything so that you can actually put that into place. So it's not trivial to move that much investment in a hurry when you want to do a reconfiguration of things. There's a waiting period. And over that waiting period, there's a bit of a reconsideration because, of course, as we pop out of a pandemic, typically, even though we don't get back to previous levels of activity, the rush of activity is very impressive. And companies feel a very, confined pressure point. They need to deliver. People are wanting to buy, so they've got to produce. And so what do? They default to their current system. And as they operate with that for a while, they reconsider all of those plans that they had during the pandemic, and they typically go back to a lot of the previous structure that was actually in place.
Well, okay, but Inu, here's where I come in and I say yes, but if we wanted to diversify more, China would be, a great bet under normal circumstances to improve our trade with, except that our relationship with China right now, I can't ever recall it being worse than it is right now. And of course, they're holding 2 of our Canadian nationals in prison there on trumped up charges. So where does that leave us?
Well, I think to say that our relationship with China is strained is an understatement at this point. And it's important to keep in mind that the pandemic has infected China too, and growth is going to slow there as well. World trade is expected to decline anywhere between 13 and 32% this year. So finding new markets anywhere is going to be a difficult challenge for Canadian businesses. And it's also important to keep in mind that China will not be able to replace the U.S. as Canada's largest trading partner. Over 75% of Canada's goods exports go to the United States. Reorienting trade of that volume is not an easy task, and nor what market forces will gravitate towards. In comparison, our exports to China are about 4.7%. In terms of our imports, it's also very minimal at this point. So to have that shift is going to be difficult. And a trade agreement is certainly not going to solve anything here. I know there was talks early on in this Harper administration, perhaps early in the Trudeau administration, that we would actually change something there and negotiate maybe a bilateral investment treaty or a trade agreement. That it has really gone out the window with the arrest of the 2 Michaels. And I think generally speaking, even if we did have a trade agreement, the fact is China is a very different regulatory environment. There's a different level of risk for Canadian businesses that are investing there, and they may just not be willing to take that risk, especially now.
In which case, Sarah, let us consider what we can do. If we want to think, and who knows when this will be, but if we want to think about a post pandemic world and the kind of changes we need to see in the Canadian economy as it relates to the United States, what's on that checklist for you?
Well, I think this is the perfect opportunity for us to talk about building back better. And I've been writing about this to not go back to, as we were just discussing, defaulting to the old ways of operating, but coming up with new ways. Being at the lead in terms of redesigning work, which we're already running experiments on, just as we are in doing this show. Working in different ways than we would normally, ways that have ended up in some ways being more inclusive of people with disabilities and things like that, but also leading to uncovering issues around, for example, childcare and flexible work, and trying to understand how to better support people as they work. We can talk about reorienting priorities. We'd already been in a conversation. I was on your show last fall talking about how we're in this new conversation about corporations turning to more stakeholder approach. That has just been put on supercharger at this point because there's so much awareness of the social issues that corporations should be addressing through the pandemic, through the racial unrest in the United States. And we have to also think about the governance of corporations, how they're actually making decisions and how they're held accountable. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do to build back better, which again could innovate around some of these problems that we're highlighting in this conversation.
Yeah, Sarah, let me do a follow up there because I hear what you're saying, and it's you're absolutely right in using this program as an example of how we've sort of innovated and adjusted and adapted in order to
Right.
keep doing what we're doing, but it's not better. This show is not better as a result of me being in my attic every day and not being able to actually look into the eyes of any of the guests that I talk to. And not to mention all the technological difficulties that we have trying to do it with screens freezing. Anyway, I won't get into chapter and verse of it, but I guess my point is I get adapting, I get innovating. I'm not sure you've sold me on better yet. Sell me on better.
Right. Well, I think we have to think about better for whom. So, for example, just looking at work from home types of issues. Well, people with disabilities have been advocating for years and years and years for these kinds of accommodations. That the moment that the pandemic came along and we were all forced to work from home, suddenly all of these accommodations were made available. This could be much more inclusive. Just that one example. Think about people who live in the Canadian North who might want to participate in good jobs, but don't necessarily want to leave their communities. Now we have the technology, we have the ways of working that could actually include these kinds of folks in our economy in better ways. So I agree with you. Maybe this is a little bit lower tech version than the lovely studio that you have and the great cameras. But on the other hand, you may be able to include guests that you were never able to include before because of this technology. So I think we have to define, and this is why the stakeholder approach is so important, because it helps us think about better in terms of whom, like really look at who are all the people who could benefit from a new way of configuring work. We now know who the essential workers are in our society, and they're not the people who are making the big bucks right now. And so maybe we need to rethink, what does it mean to actually support an essential worker and pay for essential workers? Some people might not benefit from that, but the essential workers might benefit from that. So I think it goes back to the question of for whom would it be better?
Okay, fair point. And I guess I should say for the record, this Stage 10 platform that we're using does in fact allow us to stay on the air when we don't have access to our studio or our control room. So in that respect, that's good. Let's
Yes.
just say that for the record. Okay. Peter, Peter, come on in here and talk to us again about the post-pandemic world and the kinds of changes you would like to see in terms of how Canada can relate to both the U.S. and China going forward.
Well, here's where I want to take on what Inu is saying, because the way that the world is actually developing as we go forward, our traditional markets are not going to be the fast-growing markets in the world. And when we talk about 75% of our stuff going to the United States, it sounds like an insurmountable problem that we would want to diversify, or that we would even be able to diversify anywhere else. China is our #2 customer. The difference in the growth that we have experienced for the last 18 years between ourselves and China, so us exporting to China versus the United States, if that continues on into perpetuity at exactly those same differential growth rates, China will be Canada's #1 customer in 26.3 years. Now, that's not a magic moment because we're actually moving towards that over time. We are diversifying, and we are diversifying by leaps and bounds. Back in 2000, 5% of our merchandise exports went to emerging markets. That number is now 13%. That's a percentage of all of our exports. That's a remarkable transformation over a very small period of time. Now, what's going to drive that? Well, we've got aging of the population that is fettering all of our traditional customers. But that's not the case in some key emerging markets. And even where it is the case in emerging markets, the middle class is growing by leaps and bounds there. That's what's going to feed their demand for what we do. So a statistic I want to leave everybody with to think about is that China is actually right now adding to its middle class by Canadian population every year. That's a key source of demand. That's demand for stuff that Canada is actually very good at producing. It starts with food, and there's all kinds of other things that we can and will be sending China's way as far as I'm concerned.
Can I ask you the uncomfortable follow-up, which is whatever it was, 26.3 years, whatever you said, when they're going to be our #1 trading partner. Is that something we want? Do we want our #1 trading partner to be an authoritarian communist country that jails our citizens for no particular reason and who flagrantly disregard the norms of quote unquote civilized society at a regular turn?
Well, that's a great question, Steve. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden China becomes our dominant trading partner, because there are other economies out there that are growing by the same leaps and bounds. So right behind China, you have an India that is, fast becoming unable to feed itself because of the growth of its own middle class. They're adding to their middle class by 20 million a year, with a target under the Modi government to get to 30 million a year. So they would be rivaling China. And as they exceed in their wealth, well, there's another market that we can go for as well. But we're not saying, turn away from the US market. It's still going to be a massive powerhouse of sales for us. It's just we're going to have more choice and more selection. So it doesn't mean that even a behemoth like China is going to be able to look into us and dictate what it is that we're actually doing. We will have a far more diversified set of markets that we're actually servicing over time. And that's something that everybody has always desired for Canada, right from Confederation until now. We're actually seeing the possibility of that occurring, inside maybe not our lifetimes, but inside of our kids' lifetimes for sure.
Okay. Inu, can I get you to weigh in on that same question?
Sure. I think Canada has always been a trading nation. And the one thing it really should be doing right now is doubling down on its commitments to liberalization, not just abroad, but also at home. Canada needs to avoid the nationalist temptation that's occurring in many countries to turn inward, to repatriate supply chains. I think there's something that can be done for stockpiling, but we shouldn't be trying to reshore production all back to Canada. That just does not make sense. It's infeasible, and it could be incredibly disruptive for Canadian businesses. So we have to think forward about that. But then in addition to that, Canada has always been a positive voice for multilateralism in the world, and it should continue to do so. Canadian diplomats have been at the forefront in negotiations for the reform of the WTO, and our close relationship with the United States, understanding the odd quirks of our U.S. negotiators and the personalities that are there. I think Canada is really well placed to be the kind of moderator for that compromise, and I think we should keep up those efforts so that the more that we shine as an example for the rest of the world, when there are so few positive examples, I think that's going to be the best thing for Canada going forward.
Inu, odd quirks? Odd quirks?
I mean,
yeah,
there is some odd quirks. You just have to look at the NAFTA negotiations that happened between Minister Freeland, and she's given a lot of stories about what occurred in the negotiating chambers with the U.S. negotiators. I mean, we had 11th hour negotiations where there were demands that I think most Canadian diplomats would just look at and be shocked. So I think that, we learn to deal with that with an even hand. again, to be calm and to think forward and to realize that our most important trading partner is the United States. We weren't going to just toss the table over because of the current personality that's sitting in the White House.
And that was highly successful, wasn't it? I mean, there were major concessions that Lighthizer made at the 11th hour. So it was a brilliant piece of negotiating. And it really begs the question, what was the US's intent inside of those negotiations, and what's their real intent in negotiating with China and challenging the World Trade Organization and things like that? We might not have time to discuss that, but those are very key questions inside.
Well, go ahead, throw a theory on the table. What do you think their true intent was?
Absolutely. I mean, the theory here really is that the U.S., forget Trump, administration after administration has been very uncomfortable with China getting a free pass into the WTO. Right from the get-go in 2000, they got under the bar on a lot of considerations that we held other countries' feet to the fire on in a very big way. Trade in agriculture, trade in services, intellectual property protection, currency manipulation, all of those issues. And China, I mean, we were so intent, all nations were coming together and saying, China is the place to be. We want to maybe get preferential treatment or what have you. I don't know what the motives were in giving China that free pass, but the United States, it's been a bugbear for them ever since. So one could see their remonstrations at the moment as being a grand attempt to get a tilted table and to make it straighter. I've never believed for right from the get-go that the Trump administration was about destroying the relationship between the United States and China. It's about getting that tilted table and making it straight again. And notice, that other nations, whereas they may not like the tactics, are sitting on the sidelines and allowing the United States to do this. Why? Well, maybe they also have come to their senses and agreed that the trade table was tilted. So that's a theory I'd put on the table that addresses that issue, but that's probably hotly contested by the other panelists.
That's another show. We're going to have to wait for another show to get them to hotly contest. I only have a minute left, and I actually, Sarah, want to give it to you because I know I was very lucky to be born Canadian, and you have chosen to become Canadian, and originally being from the States, of course. And I wonder why you did that.
Well, I feel extremely lucky. In fact, I just became a Canadian citizen this February and got my passport literally days before coming back across the border to the U.S. And I'm very eager to get to my adopted home of Canada. And I did that in part because I really appreciate the Canadian society and the emphasis on collectivity and social good. The United States is one of the most individualist societies. And I actually appreciate, and even looking at the way the recovery from COVID has been built in Canada, paying attention to issues like gender-based violence and childcare in a way that's not happening in the United States is exactly why I'm very proud to have become a Canadian citizen. And that's why I keep advocating. I want to be ambitious for Canada in terms of taking its place on the world stage and standing up, as we talked about earlier, for multilateralism and standing up for a better world. And for those reasons, I'm very proud to be Canadian.
Well, one of the perks of this job is that I have the authority to speak on behalf of 36 million other Canadians in saying we're very happy to have you. So there.
Thank you so much.
That's Sarah Kaplan from the Rotman School at U of T. Inu Manik from the Cato Institute was in Vancouver. Peter Hall from Export Development Canada in the nation's capital. It's great of all three of you to join us on TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Nice to be with you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.